So just a quick introduction on ITO and our perspective on that today. And then, as you said, the market trends and recent price developments. We do have other webcasts that dive even more into the price developments, but here just a recent recap of what we've seen. And then the checklist, which is the main theme today, the 10 things you need to consider before you enter into an ITO agreement, or things you need to consider in your agreement that's already in place, and should at least just check if your agreement lives up to your expectations in this regard.
So to start, we want to just sort of clarify what we are talking about when we are talking about ITO. And what you see on the screen is sort of a figure to show all the dimensions there is to an ITO agreement in our eyes. And firstly, the services, we see that this is the data center services, that is the server and storage, mainframe and housing, but also we talk about the service desk and also the end user computing and the phones distributed to employees and such. And all of these services are comprised of hardware, software, FTEs, and then some small other costs. But inside of all these service towers, as you may call them, there are a lot of different things which impact the price which you have to pay for the services. And this could be the degree of standardization, this could be the degree to which you have to transition versus transform your services. And then there are, of course, stuff like the complexity and the scope, how much is actually included in the ITO agreement and how complex is the services delivered. And then there are the contractual terms such as the SLAs and the contractual terms and conditions in the agreement. And we will get deeper into much of this later, but this is what we are talking about when we are talking about ITO, and these in the gray boxes, these are the service areas which we are talking about today.
Yeah, and the variations within all of these cost drivers and the parts of the ITO service is basically what we'll be focusing on in different examples. But of course, there are more cost drivers and more detailed cost drivers than the ones listed here, but these are the main or the overall cost drivers in ITO agreements, and what we in particular are focusing on when reviewing an agreement or helping forming a new agreement or just benchmarking agreements. Yeah. So the current trends and the price developments in the ITO markets, as you might know, we have a continuous touch with the IT market through our consultancy work, but also just with the research that we do and with the dialogues we have with both clients and vendors of the ITO market, especially in the Nordics. And here we just we've summarized some of the recent market observations that we feel are the more interesting ones and more noticeable ones. So one, and it's probably not a big surprise to any of you, at least some of these, but at least it's just worth mentioning and worth diving into a bit deeper. So of course, or not, perhaps not of course, but security is at top of mind for both the clients and vendors, and the vendors know that this is an area where you'll see an increase in demand, and clients feel the need for the security. The security is with all of the hybrid warfare and just technologically evolved crime and things like that. Security is a big thing for our clients, and this security is a broad spectrum of services, but it's in essence, it's about protecting your business, so you can concentrate on doing business and not so much of just being on the defense. Then there's a lot of regulation, new regulation and a bit older regulation, but regulation is a hot topic. That's within that's within reporting. It's within security. It's for certain industries like the financial sector or with the critical infrastructure, where you've seen a lot of recent development in regulation. And to be compliant with this, the ITO market has had to evolve and develop new services, but also just new reporting standards and a way of documenting that you're actually doing a risk analysis, etc. And then another trend, which is somewhat related to regulation. I'll just remove our hats for a second. It's the more what we can call a skeptical approach to the public cloud infrastructure. So there we see much less cloud-first strategies. This is a thing that has been happening for a few years though, but going back 4 years time from now, there was a lot of cloud-first strategies within the Nordic client market, the client landscape. This is much less so now, as the cloud transition has proven to be more difficult and especially much more expensive than anticipated in the beginning of this cloud adventure, and because of that, the CFO raised his or her eyebrows and said, well, I think we need to pay more attention to this. We can't just choose the cloud first whenever. We need to do it when the cloud has more benefits than any other alternatives. And that's a new or a growing trend that we see a lot of hybrid setups with both public cloud and some on-premise or private cloud platforms. And it's basically driven from a need to have more predictable cost and more control of your cost.
Yeah, and also the unpredictable cost in the cloud has actually led to the maturing of some of the cloud management services provided by both by in-house IT departments, but also by vendors offered to clients to help them with managing their cloud costs. But we'll get back to that in a moment.
Yeah. So these were the first three we would like to mention. There are a few more.
Yes, so over the past few years, we have seen that recruitment and talent development is an important issue in the IT market. There has not been any visible changes to this over the past years when we talk to vendors and clients. And this is basically because the large capacity increases and the increasing impact of IT in most organizations is leading most organizations to search for more IT resources.
Yeah, and there's a lot of we see a lot of creative ways to go around this issue with M&A acquisitions, just be mainly driven by the lack of resources in one company, and if they are present in another company, that's a way to strengthen your resources. Yeah.
Yes, another thing is an observation we've made by talking to a lot of on the client side of the ITO market, which is that clients are looking for vendors who are proactive. And when we talk to the clients, they say that one of the things which are a bit lacking among the vendors is that they are proactive. And clients look for vendors who will proactively help clients improve their IT setup and provide them with advice on which products to buy, which products not to buy, both from a technological standpoint, but also from sort of an IT strategic one.
Yeah, so the advisory part of being in a partnership with between the client and the vendor is lacking. At least there's potential for it to evolve in a lot of the agreements we see, because the clients are screaming for advisory within the technical questions, but also the more strategic implications of this and that. And as we see it, there's a large room for vendors moving into this space where they both provide your IT operations, but on top of that, also provide a better advisory, because it's a question that we see being raised by a lot of clients.
Yeah, a lot of clients actually, they want a strategic partner, so to speak, in the IT department. So and are looking for the vendor to perhaps be that. The final part on this slide is that FinOps is on the rise, as we have said here. And what this means is that, as Dan said, there's a bit more skepticism on the cloud infrastructure, cloud-first strategies. And one way to mitigate it is, of course, to go to a non-cloud setup, but another one is to invest time and effort into FinOps, which is the financial analysis of your cloud spend and how can you optimize your cloud capacity to achieve the most possible savings, so to speak. This is something which a lot of clients are looking for, and which is not a very mature service at the moment, but is something which will be more and more in demand.
Yeah, you do see a lot of tools being developed for FinOps practices, but excuse me, you don't have a lot of actual trained resources to take on the FinOps role that is needed within any IT department or any company with a cloud footprint, because it's not just done by doing the tools are not good enough just to rely on them entirely. You also need at least a certain amount of FTEs put into this area, because it's a huge area with where if you look at how much cost you can save or move around if you start to optimizing this cloud footprint. And there is a potential again here where we see the vendors providing with this FinOps assistance, but again, you also as a client want to be a bit skeptical about who's doing the optimization of your cost, just because you don't want them to have some. You don't want the wolf to be hurting your sheep, so to speak, because there might be some areas where you don't get the best advice from the people that sell the exact same resource. So just saying that there are some areas where the vendor could provide you with FinOps. That could be your private cloud. Your private cloud vendor could provide you with FinOps assistance regarding your public cloud or the entire hybrid setup, where they could be looking at the different alternatives and suggesting which way for you to go. And a lot of we don't see any tools doing that for you, and it takes more than just a tool in the end, anyways. So yeah. Another potential, but something's on the move. And then in the same area, we have more cloud management as a service evolving. And we see vendors coming up with more and more standardized service description around cloud management, and it's not your FinOps in itself. This is more about just ensuring that the available infrastructure resources in the cloud are available to the business units or whoever is demanding it in your companies, and this is something you can buy in the market today, and the prices are moving towards some kind of steady state. So this is something that's on the rise with regards to maturity, and then. Yeah, again, watch out about the incentives. Who has the incentive to help save you cost on either the hyperscaler or your private cloud setup? So just think of that when you buy the cloud services or cloud management services. And then, of course, we need to mention AI as everyone else does, and as we say it here, it's an AI hype, but we don't actually see a lot of impact in the ITO consumption as of yet. Of course, we expect this to change a lot, but it's still early days. We're in the experimentation phases and the proof of concept phases within AI things. But this will definitely kick off at some point. And you could expect some of this. Well, currently, most of AI is done in PaaS platforms in the cloud. But we also expect this to move back to your private cloud platforms in the future. So you're not just using hyperscalers tools or PaaS services to help you in your AI venture. You also begin to see the smaller vendors providing you with all you need to do AI, and in a way where you don't have to put it into a public cloud domain, and that can be beneficial with regards to GDPR and other areas around privacy settings. So. This is definitely something that's going to move, but as of now, we don't see a lot of consumption in the ITO market that is directly coming from AI. But now I just mentioned the GDPR compliance. There's also the ESG area, and especially these days, the focus is on the reporting. Thank you. And ESG reporting is something that is the major focus within ESG right now because of the coming regulation in EU by 1st of January. A lot of vendors need to be able to report on much more areas than they were used to and capable of before, but it's also being asked for by a lot of clients all of a sudden, even though we've been talking about this for a long time, and I think most people have known this is coming. Getting ready in time has been a struggle for most, and right now basically people are just trying to be compliant with the reporting directive that's coming out, or that is coming into effect by 1st of January. So it's a hygiene factor for most vendors. They need to do it. They need to be able to report on ESG by now, at least to be considered in the mainstream agreements. But it's also something that we expect from the being just compliant. There's going to be another focus on not just getting the job done, but actually also trying to move in a more ambitious direction for a lot of clients, where they at a certain point will have the data needed and the reporting needed. Then they will start putting up goals and measuring the how it's going in any of those ESG directions that you put goals up on. So going from just compliance, we expect the ESG to at some point in the recent future, in the near future, that it will be more than just compliance.
And now the final slide on the market observations. What we see is that a lot of clients are seeing large capacity increases, and this is something which is very important also, and we'll get back to this, but also for your coming agreement is how large is the capacity increase, and who will reap the rewards when the capacity increases. Will you have contractual regulation ensuring that you as a client are awarded on the unit prices when capacity increases and such. But the most important point is that you should look to forecast both for budget security, but also for negotiation leverage, so to speak.
Yeah, because it's when looking at capacity forecasting, it's the tendency is to underestimate how much this will rise. The demand for capacity will not just based on AI, but on all the technological developments that we see. There's going to be a huge capacity increase within storage and compute and GPU compute as well. And as BI is being democratized and everyone else is using more compute power, and cameras are being put up, and IT, Internet of Things in your production line or in your services. All of these will make a huge impact on the capacity needed, and most of the vendors know this, but it's not all clients that have actually realized how much more capacity they will be needing in the near future, and doing a good forecast is essential.
Yeah, and we'll get back to this later, in why it's a good idea to have an idea of how much your capacity will increase. The next point is something which we have. It has its own webcast, which you can find on YouTube, but increased software prices, which is a big risk for the vendor or for the client, depending on the contract. What we've seen is that there have been massive price increases, and this is, for example, for the mainframe software or for virtualization, for example, or namely VMware. And what we see is that vendors will look to shift the risk onto the customer, because usually virtualization software will be included in the ITO agreement, and thus the vendor will have the risk. But the recent price increases on VMware, for example, has led the vendors to seek discussion on how can we share the risk of the additional price increases.
Yeah, so we see agreements where the software is priced on its own and has certain terms and conditions that says that this area will follow the prices that the vendor is being presented for. So the risk is moved from the vendor to the client by making the client's problem if Broadcom raises the prices once again, or any other software, because it's not just the mainframe software or VMware in particular. We see this as a general picture, that there are some software houses that are doing some massive price increases, and perhaps because some of their investors are becoming impatient about earning the earnings, but at least nevertheless we do see these price increases being way out of what was normal just 4 years ago or 2 years ago. And this shift in market dynamics is quite huge, and vendors are concerned and clients are concerned. We see a lot of concerns around in the entire market. But realizing this and just realizing this is the first step, and you should definitely look into our other webcast if this is an area of interest for you.
Yes. The final market observation for today, before we get to the pricing of ITO services, is that the last few years have seen large increases in inflation and in salaries, and this has put vendors under cost pressure, partly due to what we named earlier with the lack of IT resources available on the market. But it hasn't led them to explain the current pricing, so to speak. And what we see is that vendors are still taking a reasonably large profit on especially storage services. So the conclusion based on this is that there are still room for vendors utilizing the situation and entering the market with lower prices on especially storage.
Yeah, we still the shock of the COVID and energy crisis and all the crises that we've just been through and still are affected by in some sense. Has given an opportunity for vendors to increase prices more than their cost actually has increased. As you said, storage is one area where we can see there are some higher margins now than we've seen earlier. And of course we expect this profit margin to decrease as competition will do its thing once again. But it's good to know as a client that there are more to come for in this area.
So moving on to the price trends. For those of you who has seen our webcast before, maybe this figure will be familiar, but what it shows is the price over the last many years for server and storage outsourcing. And what we can see is that the price has decreased over the past years, but that the decrease is the pace with which it's decreasing has been steadying over the past year. So no longer these large decreases in price from year to year, which we saw maybe around 10 years ago.
Yeah. But and it's worth we mentioning that these are the unit prices for each of them. Of course, your cost within server and storage might be going the other way because you're consuming more and more compute capacity or storage capacity. But the unit prices for storage and servers within all of the tiers or the different servers that you're purchasing. Should be decreasing over time. So you're getting more capacity for the same dollar today than you did 1 year ago. But it's not the same pace that the decrease is happening as it was. But we do still see, and we did see all throughout the energy crisis and Ukraine-Russia crisis and the COVID with all the supply chain difficulties and all that, we still saw a decrease in the prices. So the underlying mechanisms were still in place, and of course it has shifted some of the timing of it, but overall this is the general picture.
Yes. And now we're getting to the part of the presentation where we will talk about how you need to prepare for your next ITO negotiation. So now we'll get into the checklist, and these are the 10 things you need to consider before entering into the agreement. And most of these you will be able to do with internal discussions in your organization, and some of you might have to discuss with the vendor.
Yeah, so first things, as you can see, the checklist is on the left here, and it's a checklist of 10 points. And the first point here is the outsourcing type. You should think about whether you are going to include cloud or on-premise services in your agreement. So will it be a hybrid agreement or not? There's a lot of thought to go into it if it's a hybrid agreement. As we just talked about, there's the whole FinOps and cloud management issue, but there's also how will you choose whether to put it in the public cloud or in your private cloud or on-premise domains. And if you are considering the public cloud as to be a part of your agreement, well, make sure that you have FinOps, considered FinOps in these decisions, as the business case of public cloud will only be a good one if you actually do use all the optimization that is available by using the exact right alternative for you and spending some time in analyzing which alternative is best for your different workloads or different demands in your organization. As we say, vendors might not be incentivized to implement these cost savings for you. So perhaps you need to do this FinOps on your own or by a third party in this. So. But anyways, main point is you should, before you enter it, have a good idea of the entire period of the contract, whether the public clouds should be part of it, and the management of your cloud resources, should that be included in your ITO agreement. As we said, it's a more standardized service that a lot of the vendors can provide you already today. So it's a good thing to include, and at least just set your agreement up for whether you want to do it yourself or you want the vendor to do it if you do have a public cloud footprint.
Yes, and this is something which you should also align with the rest of your organization. This could be the project management office who know that a project might want to use some cloud services in a year. But all of these things you should know all of these things before entering the agreement, so you know exactly all of the things you need to take into account, even if you don't use the cloud services from the beginning of the agreement. The next thing is that you should determine the need for vendor resources on the client side. And this is something we see especially in two areas. One is for clients who are operating in the critical infrastructure sector or other sectors with high security requirements. They will have the vendor resources coming on site in the client's data center to perform the operational activities, so to speak.
And the choice of that has a lot of cost impact. Of course, if you can avoid people on site your premises, well, that's a huge saving for both you and the vendor. So that's yeah.
Yes, and that's especially actually when we talk about the other example, which is the on-site service desk, because some clients, when they choose to outsource their service desk, what they want is then they agree to having vendor resources on-site to be part of the service desk service. And this is a major cost driver which you should consider if that's actually necessary. We see some agreements there might be a vendor resource on site one time per week or one time per month even to help with technical issues. But in both of these cases, both in the data center or in the service desk, this is a pretty major cost driver if you want to have the vendor's resources coming on site.
Yeah, and also if you have more locations than just one, there might be some of the locations where you don't need an on-site resource, where you can have some backup equipment if it's typical end user devices. You just have a cupboard full of extra laptops and tablets and whatever's needed, and if that kind of service is good enough for that location, well, that's a huge saving, because then you don't have to have a person there in your opening hours or whenever your service desk is open. And it's always easy to say yes to all these nicer services, but you do need to consider the price of adding an extra service layer for each of these areas. And if you don't, if it's not necessary, well, then you shouldn't include it for sure. But if it might be needed, well, then you should do some kind of a business case on it, because the pricing it will change a lot if you include on-site people, especially in these days in the service desk, where it's getting more professionalized and coming out of very big service desks, hubs, where they are extremely streamlined to deliver services at a very low cost compared to some years ago. And if you don't tap into that by demanding them to be on site, well, it's a different price game then, for sure. Yeah. Oh, wrong button. And then, as we stated before, but it's worth mentioning again, the ITO sector is impacted by a lot of different regulation, and you need to be aware of how your organization or your business is affected by the various regulations. And as we mentioned, this might be the NIS2 or the DORA or CSRD within ESG, or the ISO 27001 around risk as well, and there are a lot of these regulations that affect in different ways, and depending on who you are. So having a good idea of first how you are actually to be compliant, and secondly at what ambition level you want to comply with these different regulations, because all of the regulations come from because of a need for these areas to be more scrutinized. Because there are some issues from it. ESG is one example where, of course, it's not just about reporting how you are going to drive down your carbon footprint. It comes from there's a need for all businesses, and it's also a way to be competitive in the future if you can drive down your carbon footprint. So the regulation is one part of some of these trends, security, ESG, etc. That is on the agenda these days. But how you're gonna put in demands around the regulation is crucial in your ITO agreement. So make sure that you clarify how you are affected by these regulations, and then make sure that your agreements live up to that. NIS2 is the most present one, with October being the month where all of this regulation is about to be detailed. And all of your ITO agreements, if you are affected by NIS2, should be not just ITO agreements, but all of your agreements will need to adhere to these principles of NIS2, and some of them might be doing that beforehand, but a lot of them probably need some additional an addendum, or just a new agreement with each of your vendors, being software or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the next thing you should do is you should map out your need for the different security services which is on the ITO market, because as we mentioned earlier, there's a constantly growing number of security offerings in the ITO market, and you should consider which of these are relevant for your agreement and which of these aren't, and perhaps you are choosing to do some of the services yourselves, or perhaps you are outsourcing to another vendor which is not your primary ITO vendor. So examples of the security offerings we see in a lot of ITO contracts would be the Security Operations Center, often alongside the SIEM, the Security Incident and Event Management. These are some of the offerings which a lot of vendors provide, either by themselves or via a third party, and which you should also consider. This is an area where we also want to refer to our research magazine, Quarterly Analytics, where we have a long list of security offerings which we expect to be included in a standard ITO agreement, and then a long list of potential inclusions from your or from the vendor's part to the agreement.
Yeah, that would be regarded as add-ons to the standard operations.
Yes, and also, of course, the choice of security services to include in your contracts could be mapped out alongside maybe your organization has a security department which have an opinion on this. But you should map out the need you have for these security services, because some of them are very expensive.
Yeah. Don't buy it if you don't need it. Yeah, and then an evergreen in ITO, right sizing, but when we talk about entering into an ITO agreement, right sizing is in particular a good thing to consider, because it's a very it's a good opportunity or right time to consider right sizing as just as when you move from one house to another house, you typically do some more housekeeping and some cleaning of the attics, because you realize if we're going to move all of this, well, we're only going to move it if we actually need it. But within right sizing, there's always been a lot of cost out potential, and that comes from that we typically find that you can right size around 20 to 30%. From just over capacity being provisioned when you design various systems and infrastructure setups, and as one of the key points that we always mention when we talk about rising is that it has a direct effect on the needed hardware, but it also has a very significant indirect effect on the software that is core licensed, and that could be pricey software as Oracle database licenses or other things, VMware, that is very dependent on how many cores you are licensing, and if you can reduce that number, you also have a saving within your software area. But yeah, so do some housekeeping before you're entering into an agreement, because when you put it up for a tender or renegotiation, then you'll be asking for a certain capacity, and the prices will be affected by what capacity you actually are demanding. So yeah. Do right size.
And as we have tried to illustrate on the right side of the slide, there are different levels of right sizing which you can do depending on how much time and effort you want to put in. But what we see is that you can actually have significant savings, but from taking just the low-hanging fruit, which requires almost no effort.
Yeah.
So if we move on to the next one, this is that we say you should try to forecast the capacity needs. And the reason we are asking for the next 4 years in the poll is that a lot of ITO agreements have a base period of 4 years. And what you want to know before negotiating with a vendor is how much do we expect our capacity to increase. And there are several reasons that this is a good idea. One is it improves the accuracy of your budgeting, which your finance department will appreciate and will, and it means that you will have the money available in the IT department to actually to absorb the potential increases in capacity.
Yeah, which will make your service delivery more smooth.
Yeah, and it ensures that it's not a massive surprise to the finance department when the ITO is asking for more money after 2 years because capacity has tripled or something like that. But so one part is the budget security, but another part is also you remove uncertainty from the agreement itself. You can tell the vendor that you can make a commitment of a certain increase in volume, which might be able to negotiate you a better price. Or alternatively, you often see these agro models, which allows for discounts in the case of increasing volumes. And this is something that you should use in the negotiation of the agreement, because if you know that, or you expect that your capacity is about to increase by a lot over the coming 4 years, then you should make sure that you receive a discount on the increases in capacity.
Yeah, and including capacity flexibility in at least downward capacity flexibility is a very costly it's a costly term, especially if you don't need it. So if you have certainty to a certain degree that you're not going to be using less capacity, well, don't include it in your ITO agreement, because that will put a risk on the vendor side. And it doesn't come for free, of course. So you'll get a better ITO agreement if you know at least to some extent your forecasted capacity.
Yes, and this, as Dan said, this is something you need to align with not only your IT department but also the project office and the other business units in your organization, because that can be. They can have projects ongoing which lead to large capacity increases, and these may be several years out in the future, but knowing about this as early as possible will allow you to negotiate a better deal. Yes.
Yeah. Let's move on. And then also around alignment with your organization, when you outsource certain areas of the ITO space, well, you also have a retained organization, and you need to be, at least it's recommendable to have very clear responsibility division lines, so you know what your internal organization is about to deliver and what your vendor is going to deliver, and this does evolve as services evolve, but it also depends on what your internal organization can deliver, and the alignment of that, especially also to avoid doubling resources for an activity that you have already outsourced, but also what you might be doing internally, which is a thing we often see actually when we go through external ITO agreements, that you have some people on the inside doing the vendor's job because they weren't aware that it was actually the responsibility of the vendor. But distinguishing between the vendor's responsibility and your internal organization's responsibility is something you should map out before you enter the agreement, and reflect on what kind of sourcing landscape, like the one we have in the background, how should it look? What is it that we are designing this agreement for? And when you do that, you need to consider things like critical mass. Do you have too few activities for your internal organization so it would make more sense to outsource these activities, or the other way around? Is it a small thing that you're outsourcing that doesn't really that will only give you a not so competitive price from the vendor? Well, then you should consider keeping it inside. And yeah, all of those general thoughts should be done before designing the agreement.
And this should also be done actually if you are just renegotiating or extending an ITO contract with the same service scope as previously, because there might have been some changes to your internal organization since you entered the last agreement, which mean that the service scope of the agreement should be changed to better align with how your organization looks now, because this may not be the same as how it looked 4 years ago. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Contract terms, and as you mentioned earlier, you might want to say it.
Yes, obviously one of the main points impacting the price of the upcoming contract is the contract terms. And this is something which we see in some contracts end up impacting the price by quite a lot, and it's something we consider when we benchmark agreements. On the screen you see a list of examples on how to terms which impact the contract price. And some of these we see sometimes are chosen to be a cost. Some clients are choosing a term which impacts the price upwards without having the true need for that contract term. So if you have, for example, if you look at the top part of the figure, as Dan said, if you expect your capacity to increase by a lot during the contract period, you don't actually need to have a lot of downward flexibility in your contract, because vendors will capitalize this risk of you reducing the capacity. So if you expect it to increase, you shouldn't include a strict term in your contract saying that you have the right to reduce capacity.
But of course, if it's a sunset system that you are doing an agreement on, of course you need to include it. But it's just it will come at a price if you want to be able to turn the capacity to all the way down below 50% of the initial capacity.
Yes, and I think we won't go through the entire model, but when we send you out the slides, you can go through this. This can be another checklist just only for the contractual terms, which you can go through and look at. Do we actually need the cost driving terms in our agreement? And the left column with the green ones is the standard terms, which do not impact the price, and then the yellow ones impact it in a medium way, and then the red ones impact it a lot.
Yeah. So yes, you don't want to include a lot of the red ones if you can avoid them. And then, of course, think hard about your SLA and the penalties that you include in your ITO agreement. Of course, SLA does have this controlling mechanism, but almost all of our clients say, well, they're more interested in a high level of service than they are in the penalties, because the penalty will never make up for the unavailability of a system at a certain time. But but design your SLAs to your actual business needs, because you might want to have differentiated SLAs because there are different business needs to the different systems, and do that so the vendor can design their underlying set up to the best possible way, and in that, and by that I mean a cost-efficient way, because higher SLAs will of course mean higher prices. And if you don't need the higher SLAs, well, then you're paying for something that you didn't have to. And it's response time, it's availability, but it's also how you calculate the penalty and how large the penalty will be in certain breaches of the SLA, and all of this is pure mathematics into how big is the likelihood of falling into penalty, and how large will the penalty be for the vendor, and they will capitalize on that. If you stay within what is market standards, this is not, it doesn't have a cost premium at all. But if you exceed SLA standards, you'll be paying a higher price for your ITO, and that might be needed, as we say, because you have some very critical systems or areas where you don't where you want to pay for it, but that's fine. Just make sure that you know which areas that is, and to what. At what level you want to put the SLAs on.
So this is also just about taking a critical look at how do we need a 24/7 opening hours for all of the services, or can we make a differentiation between our gold, silver, bronze servers, for example?
Yeah.
Because you will pay a premium the more you include in a gold level SLA.
The benchmark clause is where you actually have a specialized, you do a special calculation that's made just for your agreement, and all the other ones are somewhat more just proxies, trying to proxy what the price how the price has evolved, and one limit with a price index is that you don't know if you've ever been on market pricing, but at least you follow the market movements from there.
Yeah. So what we are trying to say is that you should include both in most cases, because both a benchmark clause and a price index have pros and cons, but the cons offset each other if you include both.
And as you can see with all of you that answered, you actually have a mix of both, or it seems like you do design your indexes to the agreements in that we're talking about, which is very much in line with what we recommend. Just don't use the consumer price index for a standard IT infrastructure agreement, because they are very the degree of wages within the what you're paying for a server is very, very low. It's mainly driven by the server or the hardware prices and the software prices, because the technology has made it so that one man can manage a whole lot of infrastructure.
So if you have a fairly old ITO agreement which includes data center services such as server and storage, and it's regulated with a general price or wage index, there's a good chance that you are paying above market prices at the moment.
And also another recommendation: if you do have a benchmark clause, it's consider using it, because we also see a lot of ITO agreements that had a benchmark clause but never really never really utilized it. And another point on a benchmark clause is do pay attention to how you design it or how you phrase the benchmark clause, because we've seen benchmark clauses that states something around that the prices should end up around just above the average of all other prices, which probably wasn't the idea when you set out to do a benchmark clause, but that was the result of the formulation of the benchmark clause. We recommend that you should aim for the best price in the market, the same price that you would get if you put your ITO agreement up for an RFP or in a competitive environment, what price you would have if any other vendors was to deliver your current agreement. And you don't get that by choosing the average in a peer group. You do that by choosing the best price within a peer group. And of course, it comes down to how well the benchmarking is calculated, and that's why people include some uncertainty in the benchmark clause. Fair enough, but at least the way we calculate it with our benchmark model, we can calculate the exact market price at the given time, and shouldn't put in an extra 10% on top of that because the uncertainty is already taken into account.
And we have strong opinions on how these benchmark clauses should look. So feel free to reach out if you have a question on the one in your agreement.
Yeah, we will be happy to help you design a good benchmark clause.
So this was the checklist. These was the 10 things that we believe you should do or consider before you go into an agreement. And we want to wrap it up now, but first we just want to make a quick disclaimer that we have obviously our research magazine, Quarterly Analytics, where a lot of the things we are talking about today, you can find long pieces of research describing how to do a lot of these things. This could be around the contractual terms impacting price or the IT security services you can include, or simply a negotiation guide for when you are sitting across from the vendor.
Yeah, there's a lot of good reading material there if you are entering into an ITO agreement. A lot of what we said, but also other perspectives on it. And if anything else, you're always welcome to contact us if there are some areas that we didn't cover here or that you want to discuss.
Yes, and then actually for the Quarterly Analytics subscribers, you can have your ITO or other agreements. We can do a health check for free, which means that we look at select unit prices and provide some feedback on how we think the pricing looks with our insights into the market prices for the different services.
Yeah, that's for the QA subscribers. That's part of the deal there. Yeah. If there are any other questions and feedback, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to any of us. Yeah, thanks for joining us, all of you. And thanks for today, and thanks for tuning in.